Good morning, party people, and welcome to Office Hours. Gonna see G Surgeon in the house from the Netherlands, Greg at BMW from South Carolina. Benson Bubble says he's got me up on an excessively large screen so that my face is larger than life, which also means my body is larger than life. I tell you what, I gained weight over the pandemic like nobody's business. I used to kind of aim for around 185, and these days I'm up closer to 225. So what did not, I've been living a little too well, and moving to Las Vegas didn't help that either. I stopped exercising totally during the pandemic too, as well. I need to get out there and walk around a whole lot more. Have a little bitty dog, a little 15-pound dog named Beanie, who I walk several times a day. But of course, with a 15-pound dog, he wants to stop and smell and pee absolutely everywhere. So I don't really get any kind of cardio exercise going on. Morse says you must be 6'4". I'm 6'3", yes, 6'3", barefoot, and then you put shoes on, it only gets weirder. Which is always funny when people meet me in person because they're like, dang, I didn't expect you to be that tall. Just part of the tricks that you do with webcasting, streaming, all that is that you want the camera at relatively an eye level so that people assume that I'm their height. They assume that I'm about the same height as they are because they've never seen me in person. But yeah, 6'3" plus shoes, which makes sports cars a little bit difficult. Some of the small sports cars that I might like are a little bit harder to get in. The default blame acceptor says, is the plumbing fixed? No. So I had the plumber comes over right at the end of yesterday's stream. And I take him into the bathroom and I'm like, okay, so here's the problem. And he takes 2 pictures and he leaves. And I'm like, are you going to fix the shower? And he goes, no, I got to order the parts for that. And I'm like, it's just a pipe and a shower head. How hard can that be? You should be able to just go over to Lowe's and get that. And I'm like, and couldn't you have I could have just sent you the pictures before you came out of here. G Surgeon says, aha, consultant. Yeah, that's basically what he did. And so he's coming back again. He gave me a quote for $295. So I'm like, you could have saved yourself some money there if you would have just asked me to take pictures. So he's coming back. I don't think he really realizes, he didn't even turn on the water, so he doesn't realize how low the pressure is there. So I think he's going to be in for another rude surprise, but we'll see how this goes. SQL Pilot asks if the backyard is done. No, we are still probably, I would guess, 2 to 3 months out at least. According to the contractor, they were like 2 months ago, they said it'd be 2 months. And I'm like, no, you don't understand the scope of this job. So they're not even at the point yet where they can pour concrete across the patio and the sunken living area in the backyard. They're still working on drilling all kinds of holes for stuff that they'd forgotten about. Yesterday it was the landscape lighting. They'd forgotten that they had to put lights in at each of the steps, so they're figuring that out now and doing that work. Oh, unbelievable. So today I want to do 2 things. Today I want to play around with GitHub Copilot for the first time because yesterday's release of Azure Data Studio brought GitHub Copilot to Azure Data Studio. It's an extension, so you can do things like have it write code for you. I tried one query and I was like, oh, this doesn't work the way I thought it would. So we'll see how it goes when we get in there. So then the other thing that I wanted to do was answer a few of your questions. But first, let's go in and take a look at GitHub Copilot. So let's switch over to our remote desktop. Up in my lab, I have yesterday's brand new release of Azure Data Studio up and running with a SQL Server 2022 backend. And there's new in the extensions in yesterday's release. Oh, my Zoom it isn't working. Hold on a second here. Let me see. There we go. Yesterday's new release added a GitHub Copilot extension, and I've got that turned on there. So once it's turned on and configured, it has to connect up to GitHub to authorize your account. Because if you're a private, like enterprise-y programmer, you have to pay for GitHub Copilot. Since I do open source work, and it seems to just detect that as, do you have public repos? Do you have a public GitHub repo? So what you probably want to do if you're going to play around with Copilot is on your GitHub account, go set yourself up a public repo. It could be as easy as cloning another repo from somebody else, and that might get you free usage of GitHub Copilot. We'll see. So then I've got that installed. Now I'm going to go over to, I have a local database of SQL Server or of Stack Overflow. And so part of the siren song of this is I'm supposed to be able to say, if you say select star from DBO users, where, and I should probably blow the size up of that, but I don't intend on doing this too often, where display name equals Brent Ozar. So there's things like GitHub Copilot aren't very useful for that, where you know exactly what it is that you want. And I'm assuming that y'all have played around with Stack Overflow before, and you know the users table schema. It has things like display name, last access date, location, and so forth. So when you start to get a little bit more complicated with your query, let's say that I don't know how to get the data that I want. Let's say show the top 200 users by reputation descending, and then go, ta-da! All of a sudden, GitHub Copilot has written the query. How nifty is that? Well, it's not really done, is it? It didn't say what table it's from. Let's just go ahead and hit tab to go ahead and, whoops, so it didn't continue to show the select. There we go. So we'll fill that in, and then from users, I'm a little disappointed that it didn't do the DBO prefix, because ideally we prefix objects, but that's cool. Hit enter. Ta-da! Order by reputation descending. I love it. That's absolutely fantastic. There we go. That works beautifully. It didn't say select star, which, you know, I have mixed feelings about. Maybe people want to get all of the columns. But it kind of makes me, where did it get ID as user link from? Now, because this is trained on public data, I wouldn't be surprised if it was trained on data.stackexchange.com. Data.stackexchange.com is where people go and write queries against the Stack Overflow database. And so there's queries out there. If you go and click on those queries, let's see here. Let's find one that has users in it. That one doesn't have it. I've seen several of them that did. Yeah, see, here's an example of that kind of thing. If you look up near the top, it says select top 200 post ID as post link. I bet that there are enough open source user queries out there that that's where that's coming from. I bet that's where it's getting user link, because really that wouldn't make any sense for real world queries. So this is kind of the curse and blessing of being trained on open source material. Okay, so that worked. I'm happy with how that worked. Let's try another one. Create a stored procedure to find isn't that cool? It says find the top 200 users by reputation descending. That's kind of awesome. But I'm going to say find the users in Belgium sorted by reputation descending. All right. Create procedure, find users in Belgium. Okay, I'll take it. I wish it would have said create or alter, but I'm okay with that. Hit enter as, and I'm just going to keep hitting tab and enter. And that's not terrible. Create the users, it again has ID and reputation from users, where location is like Belgium, order by reputation descending. Okay, so let's pause here for a second. On one hand, it's kind of cool that it recognizes that location is a varchar column, and someone could be in Antwerp, comma, Belgium, South Belgium, but they could also be in like Belgium Street, London. We wouldn't want them to show up here. I kind of wish that it would do an equality search, but I understand where it's coming from, and this is good enough code to get started if I was just trying to find a quick placeholder for how would I go and get this data. This is also part of what I love about, Frag King says don't fire Richie yet. This is part of what I love about the future performance tuning is this stuff writes heinous code. This isn't just, now, and I'm generalizing, I'm not saying that GitHub Copilot does overall. I'm just saying that what we see here is heinous code. Okay, so let's try another one. And I like that. I would call that a success. And here we'll go ahead and let it fill in that whole thing just so that we can say by posterity, go. Very nice. It didn't do a begin and an end, a begin and an end on the stored procedure, which ideally, in a perfect world, I'd like to see it do, but that's okay. We're better than nothing here. All right, next up, let's say create a function to find the users who last accessed the system in a date range. Let's see what we get here. Users by last access date. That is absolutely awesome. GitHub Copilot figured out that when I said who last accessed the system in a date range, it figured out that, well, I say that, it has last access date on here, which gives me very high hopes that it figured out that last access date actually means the date they last accessed the system. We shall see. So let's say create, all right, returns table as yes, it did. How beautiful is that? That is utterly fantastic. I just love that. So it also, other things that I love, look at what it put in the select. I don't know if it always does reputation. One way to find out would be to start a new window, maybe, and do the function from there. Maybe it's just figuring out from other things that I have in the window that reputation is important to me, like it's not putting in location. That's kind of cool. I kind of like that. But I just love that it figured out what table I wanted it from and how I wanted it. That's just nifty as hell. Okay, so let's try that in a new window and see. I'm going to copy this out. I'm going to close it, and then I'm going to start a new window again here, new query, and paste. I'm going to put the same comment in. All right, so create, oh, look at that. It said create or replace function. That doesn't exist, does it? Like, I've never seen create or replace. Returns table as $. What in the Sam hell is going on here? What in the... So what I think it's hosed up on here is that because I'm not in the Stack Overflow database, I think things kind of came off the rails. Because even though I'm connected to a SQL server, this isn't even valid T-SQL syntax. So has $, like, I don't even know what language that's from. Like, if that's MySQL or if that's Postgres, I have no idea what that is. So let's try that again. I'm going to take the function, the comment there, create no. I'm going to start a new query window in the Stack Overflow database. So now see, this time I'm in the Stack Overflow database. I'll paste it in. Yeah. That is no bueno. So I don't know what to do there. Frag King says it's just also just a language model. It doesn't know. Oh, wonder what. That's weird that y'all are having video problems. You can try refreshing the stream too. Frag King says it's also just a language model. It doesn't know what exists and what doesn't, i.e., what's valid syntax. It tries to predict the next word, and sometimes you get very funny stuff. Okay, so that's Chat GPT. It's not GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot is supposed to be able to be aware of what else is inside the database, for example, and should be able to do create table functions. So let's find out if it does. Okay, so let's say create table DBO stream watchers. We'll say ID int identity. Oh, yay! Copilot fixes that. Primary key clustered. It didn't tell me that, but that's okay. I don't mind doing that. Stream name varchar 50. Watcher name. Yeah! It automatically figured out watcher name and it did varchar 50, which I'm fine with. Go and run that. Now, inside this same window, as SQL guy says joining late. Is that the Visual Code GUI? What some people might do is they might look up at the top of the screen and see what the app name was. SQL guy, I guess you're not quite that savvy, so I guess I'll have to point that out to you there. So now with that create table inside the same window, let's say create a function to get watchers. It already said watchers for a stream. Watchered for a stream. Order by watcher name. Look at that. It figures out. That's totally cool. I love it. Now the magic's gonna. Let's see what happens. That's the wrong. So, and then it starts again. Now it says create a function to get streams for a watcher ordered by stream name. Okay, that's kind of cool. I like that it would try and piece those two things together. So what do I like about this? It knew exactly what the table name was and what the columns were, but it might be inferring that based on the context of this window. It might not be aware of what's actually inside of the database. So now let's copy that exact same SQL guy, not Windows guy. That's true. That's fair. Let's copy that exact same comment. Let's close this. Let me make sure I actually created the table. Whoopsie. Run. There's already an object. Okay, good. Now, the object exists in the database. Let's refresh the list of tables. So the object is there in the database right there. Oh, do you want to reduce, it says, do you want to reduce the table designer load time by enabling database model preloading? The database model will be preloaded when you expanded the thing in Object Explorer. Okay, well, let's just say yes, sure, why not? So let's go, now that I have that, let's go new query window for Stack Overflow, paste. So now I've said the same thing, create a function to get watchers for a stream ordered by watcher name. And unfortunately, I don't get anything inside here. That kind of blows. Here I'm getting stuff that's unrelated to my table structure. So now it's not even doing a SQL Server language. That's something that's totally different. That is Postgres. So this kind of sucks. So my first reaction here from GitHub Copilot is because it go GitHub Copilot inside Azure Data Studio is the thing that you would want from GitHub Copilot is the ability to do things like write queries for you based on what your database structures are. But clearly, not only does it not know what structures I have, hell, it doesn't even know what language I'm using. I am in Azure Data Studio connected to Stack Overflow, running on a Microsoft SQL Server instance, and it's outputting Postgres. So I think my job is safe again for this week. Woo! Oops, wrong button. Let me go over here. All right, so I think my job is safe at least for this week. Chris says, now we need ADS Clippy to recommend indexes for the function. I was totally, the next thing that I was going to go look at, I'm moving things around on my desktop here. The next thing that I was going to go look at, if it could successfully write a procedure or a function, the next thing that I was going to look at is saying, hey, I frequently query this, I run this query, how do I make it go faster? I'll create this index and then see what it would do. And unfortunately, no can do. Richie says, users can't even tell me what results they want. How can AI determine what the query should be? I was amazed that it was able to pull off the last access date thing, but based on what we saw just there so far, that it doesn't actually know the table structure, I'm reasonably confident that that's just outputting stuff learned from data.stackexchange.com or perhaps from my blog. I don't know why anyone would ever base machine learning based off of that, but there you have it. I was also debating when I first started this, I was debating whether or not I was going to write a blog post on it. Right now, I don't think it even needs to get the visibility like raised. I don't want to necessarily write a blog post just to poop on it because I think that I'm excited that Microsoft is making investments and that technology can only get better from here. I'm a huge believer in things like ChatGPT and Stable Diffusion. I love those technologies, and we're at the very infancy of them. They'll be changing continuously, so of course we have some time to grow there. All right, let's stop for a second and thank our sponsor before we run into questions. So our sponsor this week is Quest Foglight. Quest Foglight is an enterprise monitoring tool that monitors Oracle, Postgres, SQL Server, all kinds of like app servers, web servers, and you can get a totally free trial of it. Not the kind of trial you have to install and provision servers, but you can simply go over to brentozar.com/go/try Foglight, and you can jump straight into Foglight from there. You get your own virtual instance of Foglight up in the cloud so that you can see how it works monitoring servers. That's over at brentozar.com/go/try Foglight. Mr. Greater Than says, better than basing the machine learning model off of my code. You know, it's kind of the blessing and the curse of open source is that, it was trained off of stuff that's out in GitHub. My own stuff is out there in GitHub. One of the other demos that I was going to run was that I was going to say, create a stored procedure that does a health check, and then see if I could get it to create things like SP Blitz without including the copyright license, which is going to be kind of funny. Surly Dev liked yesterday's stream when I was trying to figure out how my camera worked because I was set up a little oddball and I was pointing in really weird directions. Richie says, seeing ChatGPT write unit tests is pure comedy. See, now Richie had said, so Richie, for those of you who don't know, Joris is Richie, the developer who powers everything at brentozar.com that requires any kind of logic. He had said that he writes unit tests with it. Having seen what I just saw, I totally get how I could use it for testing because I would put create or alter proc up at the top, put the contents of the stored procedure or the function or whatever, and then have it write unit tests underneath it. That's kind of self-contained and I get it. Whereas if I'm trying to point to an existing database and it calls other stored procedures, or if I want to say get things from this table that doesn't exist, it's kind of, boy, is it a long way from home right now. All right, so let's go take some of your questions. So the top rated question from PollGab is from Byron. He's been seeing plan cache queries for a long since retired table. What's the best way to track down the app querying this table? Rename the table. Rename it as underscore to be deleted underscore and put the date that you're going to delete it. When the support request comes in, that tells you who's been using the table. Okay, so if you're not a fan of that commando method, where like me, I just roll through with a machine gun and ask questions later, the other way that you could do that is set up either extended events trace, SQL Server audit, or profiler looking for that table. My personal favorite would probably be auditing, just because it is an enterprise edition. I think it's still enterprise edition. I'm not sure if that went standard edition or not, but I think auditing is still only an enterprise edition feature. But then that way you could write it off to a file and go back and look at it later, and it'll tell you who accessed it, which rows they fetched, what they saw, and things like that. That'd be my personal favorite. Next up, Eduardo asks, what's your opinion of ApexSQL? Richie says, what's your opinion of ApexSQL SQL Plan Viewer? I've never used it, so I couldn't say. I want to say that it costs money. I'm not entirely sure. Neither of those products I actively use, though. Me personally, myself, neither of them seem to be updated that frequently, like with all the new features that keep coming out in newer versions of SQL Server. So I just kind of can't afford to rely on those if they don't support everything. Next up, SQLrage says, are there any tips or tricks to prevent non-yielding schedulers related to I/O issues? Fix the I/O issues. He continues on saying that Microsoft is telling us that we're having I/O problems after we open Microsoft support tickets. They're right. That is the only reason I've seen non-yielding CPU schedulers due to I/O is crappy I/O subsystems. Where people are putting in filter drivers, they have priority boost turned on the SQL Server, so SQL Server has a higher priority than the filter driver, or they have truly heinous storage. Go fix that problem. That is the right root cause. Next up, let's see here. GP Geek says, I've got a case where index rebuilds run every week, but the tables keep showing a fragmentation of 98% every day. What's wrong? Normally, it's really tiny tables. You're rebuilding really tiny tables. But the other problem can be just data change, just based on the way that the data is accessed, that it is actually getting fragmented that bad. The thing that I would do is just go Google Brent Ozar fragmentation, and I've got several videos out there where I explain why defragmenting your tables isn't really going to get you across the finish line long term, and you need to consider other things instead. And I tell you what to consider in there. Oh, Nicolai wants to get me in trouble. Nicolai says, what is your opinion of the Microsoft MVP award? I'm going to need to take a drink and think about this one. So I gave up my MVP award, 5, 6, 7 years ago now. Several years ago, because the benefits weren't worth it to me personally. As an MVP, I had to sign NDAs, so I couldn't talk about what was coming. And Microsoft wouldn't tell us what was coming until it was too late and we couldn't do anything about it. And then they wanted us to evangelize the product, even though we might not believe in whatever that feature was. I'll give you a great example with StretchDB. When StretchDB first came out, when they first started talking about it behind closed doors under NDAs, I took one look at it and I was like, this doesn't work. There's no way this is going to get any adoption whatsoever based on how it's priced and based on the operational difficulties with it. It will not work. And I explained why. I said, this, and this will stop all adoption dead. And lots of other MVPs had the same complaint. All kinds of problems with StressGB. It's never going to work. So then the feature comes out, and what happens? Well, of course, it doesn't work because people who were MVPs had a lot of expertise around that product area and what was going to work and what wasn't. And it fell flat on its face and didn't get adopted. Fast forward to yesterday. SQL Server Management Studio 19.1 removed support for StretchDB. Just totally took it out very quietly. I'm sure that that feature is marked for death. You know, if Management Studio won't even work with it, odds are it's on its last legs. So for me, there wasn't much bang for the buck other than this badge of saying, hey, I'm a Microsoft MVP. But that badge means progressively less and less over time because Microsoft was giving it out to people who didn't necessarily have any technical knowledge of the product whatsoever. They were just doing a great job of cheerleading the product, like repeating press releases. So I got to the point where I was like, I don't think this is really worth it for me, so I stepped aside. Having said that, if you're an up and coming blogger, if you're an up and coming presenter who wants to improve your career, having an MVP badge makes it look like you're awesome, and it can lead to opening doors, networking with other MVPs, networking with the Microsoft organization folks. It can open doors. You should try it if you get the opportunity. Would I do it again myself personally? Absolutely. In the beginning of my career, yes. But once you get past those benefits, it's not worth quite as much. Next up, this will be the last one that we take today. Mr. SqlSeeks says, when I'm using a union operator to join the results of multiple queries, does the order of the queries affect how SQL Server gets the data? Well, here's the thing, Mr. SqlSeeks. There is absolutely no way, when you're given a query, there's absolutely no way to tell how SQL Server executed that query. There's no way to visualize what SQL Server did when it executed. There's no way to see the plan that it had and how those actual results came out. Wouldn't it be cool if we could somehow take a query and then look at how SQL Server was going to execute that and then rewrite the query like your question suggests and then see a new version of how SQL Server would execute that? Wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? Mr. SqlSeeks, it's a shame you don't know how. Wink, wink. All right, so that wraps it up for today's office hours. I will stop here and go. I have a whole bunch of home renovation stuff that I got to do today, but I'm still mesmerized by what I'm going to say about GitHub Copilot. So thanks for hanging out with me today, and I will see y'all next week on the next office hours. Adios.